folks. Welcome. I'm Rena, host of the Healthier Podcast, founder of Health Bootcamps. And today you're in for a treat because we have the very legendary, renowned scientist, MD, author, TED Maestro, Dr. William Li. He's written a new book called Eat to Beat Disease. Now, you might know Dr. Li from his very famous TED Talk on Can We Eat to Starve Cancer? Or perhaps you've seen him on the Dr. Oz show, CNN, MSNBC, the Time Magazine, O Magazine. Dr. Li is a true bona fide celebrity. And of course, he has served on the Harvard Medical School faculty and presented recently at the Vatican's Unite to Cure conference. I'm so excited to have you here with us today, Dr. Li. Welcome. Why did you write the book, Eat to Beat Disease?
I'm a medical doctor. I'm an internal medicine specialist by training and a research scientist. And for the last 25 years, I've been doing what I was trained to do, which is diagnose disease and then write prescriptions to try to treat those diseases, really chasing the horse after it's come out of the barn. And about 10 years ago, I bigger opportunity for me to pursue, which is prevention. And when you're talking about prevention, you really can't talk about medicines, and you need to talk about something like food. And so what I started to do was to really look at what is the science that underlies how food can influence our health. And while many other people are looking at what foods you need to cut out of your life, I became much more interested using research in figuring out how foods can be added to your life in order to be able to enhance your health. And here's what I discovered that led me to write this book, that when it comes to food and health, it's actually not just about the food. It's about how our body responds to what we put inside it. And that's what led me to discover that, in fact, our health is not simply the absence of disease, but it's actually the result of a number of our body's hardwired natural defense systems that are within us that protect our health from the time we're born to our very last breath. And foods can activate those health defenses.
You created the revolutionary concept, or you revealed the revolutionary concept of angiogenesis, which of course is, as you say, at the heart of sort of these processes. Explain to our viewers and our listeners, what is angiogenesis? And then we can dive into the actual foods themselves.
So angiogenesis is one of our body's health defense systems. There's 5 of them, and I write about all 5 in the book. But angiogenesis, one of them, is how our body grows blood vessels. This is our circulation, which brings oxygen and nutrients to every cell in our body. Powerful defense. And in fact, when we have just the right amount of circulation, we are completely healthy. When we have too much circulation, it can feed diseases and is often accompanied by inflammation. When we don't have enough blood vessel, enough circulation, you wind up actually having tissues and cells and organs that actually have trouble surviving, and so they can actually die. So the way that angiogenesis protects us is really maintaining exactly the right amount of circulation, and foods can influence that. Right, so in addition to angiogenesis, another really remarkable defense system is our regenerative medicine, our regenerative system, our stem cells. When we were kids, we all were taught by our teachers that starfish and salamanders can regenerate. Now turn that upside down on its head, because we now know that people do regenerate. We regenerate slowly from the inside out using our stem cells. And guess what? Foods can actually help influence that and boost that regenerative process as well. A third defense system would be our microbiome, which everybody's hearing about now, the healthy gut bacteria and bacteria in other places of our bodies. 39 trillion bacteria in our bodies. So in fact, we're all infected, but not sick. It's really quite a remarkable system. It's part of our ecosystem that protects our health. And then there's DNA, which we always think about as our genetic blueprint, but it's a lot more than that. Our DNA turns out to protect us from the environment. So for example, if you wind up going to the beach and you have a lot of sunshine coming on, your ultraviolet radiation, DNA damage. If you're actually breathing secondhand smoke someplace, that will cause DNA damage. And if you're filling up your car at the filling station, if you stand up, whether you stand upwind or downwind, if you're downwind and you can smell the fuel, the petrol, that can cause DNA damage. And our DNA system can protect us against that damage by fixing itself. And then finally, our immune system, which everybody knows defends us against infection, turns out to be more powerful than we ever imagined. In fact, we now know that our immune system can defend us against even cancer.
And you're arguing that these defense systems can be strengthened and bolstered by diet. Is that correct?
That's right. So while biotech and pharmaceutical companies are working furiously to develop new treatments that are targeting these defense systems, every single one that I mentioned, blood vessels, stem cells, microbiome, DNA, this is a real bona fide scientific effort. It turns out that in parallel, there has been a sea of research conducted by myself and other people that are interested in this field that can show that these same processes that biotech companies are going after can be boosted, enhanced by our food. And this is done, studied using the same rigorous, serious scientific methodologies that biotech companies are using. So we can finally start taking our food seriously using the same systems that we study medicines.
And what are your thoughts about foods as a supplement? Because there's all these new supplements that are out, right? Like 84 foods in, freeze dried, and we've got the essence out of them, and we're giving them to you in a little pill versus actual food. Dr. Lee, what have you found? What is better?
Right. Well, I don't think we know the answer to that, except that what we do know is that whole plant-based foods in general are the basis for not only a healthier diet, but really a more fulfilling life. I mean, basically everybody feels better when they're actually cutting out the processed foods and excessive meat and eating a more plant-based diet. That's been shown by science and clinical study. And while there may be a role for dietary supplements, the idea of supplements came years ago when people were actually undernourished and were missing critical vitamins. And so the vitamin industry really sprang up by helping to supplement some of the missing nutrients. Well, fast forward to today. Most people actually have an adequate sort of base of nutrition, except that you can always get more by eating the whole food. So it's not just the vitamins that you can actually get. There's the fiber, there are the bioactives, and in fact, in many cases, even the healthy bacteria that accompanies our food. You can't replace that with simply a single supplement. There are no magic foods, magic pills, or magic diets that can actually do it.
And in fact, what's interesting is that each of us is a snowflake in terms of how our body reacts to different foods, how we process certain foods. I love that example you gave about certain therapies that were done, and the difference between those who succeeded and failed was a particular kind of a bacteria that was in the gut of the patients that survived and thrived. And the only way to get that bacteria was to actually eat real food. And I think you talked about pomegranate as an example. So talk a little bit, because I think the challenge we face today, Dr. Lee, is that we're sort of a fad society. So keto is in, right? So now everyone's following the keto diet. We seem to follow different fads. There was a low-fat diet, the fat-free diet, the sugar-free diet, and everyone seems to want to follow these, whereas I think a big part of what you're saying is you have to figure out what your imprint is and then feed what it is that your body needs. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, what we know from both medicine and nutrition, and this is a very modern understanding, is that every individual is different. And it makes total sense. Not only are our genetics unique, but we also have our own individual lifestyles and life's not perfect. Everybody lives in their own existence, which changes over time. And so, it's a little magical thinking that even the medical community has, that a single pill is going to do the same thing for everybody. And by the same token, it's also slightly magical thinking that the same food will do the same thing for everybody as well. You are absolutely right. We tend to live in a fad-driven society, but I think in part that's because we have not traditionally had the same amount of knowledge, foundation, base, fact that we have for food as we have had in other areas of medicine or health, for example. And so without that foundation, which I think we're beginning now to have, we're at the beginning of a new era where the science has advanced, so we finally know something about how foods actually interact within our body. And one of the secrets is actually what Mother Nature has put in these foods. These are bioactives, these are fibers, and in some cases, they're actual bacteria that come in our food. And when we eat those foods, foods, those elements wind up interacting with our own cells and causing beneficial effects, and in some cases, harmful effects as well. But in my book, Eat to Beat Disease, I'm focusing on the scientific evidence between the helpful effects.
Mm. And what are your thoughts on keto? Do you think it's the right approach to beating cancer, especially since you have so much, on the keto diet, especially as it pertains to cancer, because I know you've done a ton of work on beating cancer with diet. So what are your thoughts around the keto diet, and especially for those people who argue that, hey, that's how we live. We, are hunter-gatherer, we eat a lot of meat, and so that's kind of the natural way of living. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, ketogenesis is not a new idea. It's actually quite an old idea going back more than 200 years, where it has to do with metabolism. And we all knew about ketogenesis because in diabetes, one of the complications of diabetes is that we actually don't utilize our sugars and properly. Our insulin malfunctions, and then frankly, we wind up actually going into a ketogenic state. That can be a medical emergency, a crisis, and it can actually bring people to the hospital. It can even kill people. However, I think in its modern iteration, the ketogenic diet has really been about metabolic control of the body using, an extreme of diet. It turns out in cancer research, which is where the best research has been done, it does turn out for brain tumors and also for types of epilepsy as well in children, that going on a ketogenic diet seems to reboot the software within the brain, and cancer is growing within the epileptic brain, to be able to help calm things down or slow down the tumor growth. It's not a cure. It's definitely not a cure-all, and it doesn't actually prevent cancer per se. There's not enough evidence for that. But for brain tumors, it seems like there is some benefit for that. That said, that's different than saying we should expand it to every type of cancer that's known. We don't have enough information on that yet. And certainly for healthy people, you can go on a ketogenic diet. You can actually lose some weight, feel a little bit better. You're probably cutting out the opportunity to have a lot of good healthy foods that you might otherwise want to have or even need to have, but it's really unsustainable. In other words, it is a fad. It is something you can embark on for a short period of time. Probably is not terrible or really hurts you in for a short period of time, but it's almost impossible to sustain for prolonged periods.
And as you talk about eating to beat disease, and keto tends to be very limited in a lot of the plant family, beans included. What are your thoughts with respect to, does keto actually then contribute to creating an environment where disease might thrive, for example, because you're not including a lot of the foods that might boost immunity or that might stop angiogenesis? What are your thoughts on that?
One of the things I write about in my book is that, it's time to really rejoice in the food that we can actually eat for health. And because it's not a philosophy of eating that involves exclusion, but really using science to figure out what we want to include in our diet, I actually have more than 200 foods listed across different categories, fruits, vegetables, even dairy products and beverages, and a whole lot of other areas, legumes, nuts. And so you can, no matter what your philosophy is, whether you're keto, Whole30, any kind of philosophy, Atkins, you can still use this list of foods that are supported by science to be able to find a solution for you. So I can, from my book, though, my point is you can take almost any philosophy, any structure of eating, and you can pick within those foods and you'll still start getting some of the benefits. The key for me is, how do you actually embark on a lifetime of sustainable, healthy eating? At the end of the day, this is something we should all endeavor to try to children. And so they have lifelong patterns. And if you're an older person, and you're well established in your ways, we want something that can actually take us to our golden years, and not just something that, we give up on after a month or two or 6 months or even after a year. We want to have a lifetime of healthy eating where it becomes second nature.
And that's what we do with health boot camps, right? That's why we create these online boot camps, because it isn't about a short fix. It's not about a band-aid. It's about truly a lifestyle. And that means changing habits. And that means doing something ongoing for at least 40 days. And so for those of you who are interested, do check out health boot camps. We've got a lot of great boot camps on creating the good habits for sustainable long life. Okay, ding, 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 ding. Moment of reveal. What are your top 5 foods that you recommend of the 200 foods that you've identified as being great for beating disease?
So many good foods that are good for you. I really like to be able to tell your listeners about a few that actually are surprises. And I think the surprises show us how powerful science is in being able to set the record straight on foods where there are confusion. So for example, for angiogenesis, one of the great foods that actually benefit our circulation and can actually prevent cancers from recruiting their own blood supply is soybeans, soy.
Oh.
Now, soy has actually gotten a scary reputation because many people feel that the plant estrogen found in soy can cause breast cancer. And, many women walk around fearing soy protein. We know that human estrogen can actually fuel some types of breast cancer, but science tells us that the plant estrogen found in soy is nothing like human estrogen. And in fact, it counters human estrogen. And so it can actually intercept and reduce the risk of breast cancer. So in my book, I write about a study of 5,000 women who already have breast cancer. These are the most vulnerable people. And that study showed that those women who ate more soy actually had a 30% reduction in mortality. And if their cancer was successfully treated, they had almost a 32% reduction in their cancer coming back.
It's incredible.
Now, we know even what's in the soybean. It's a natural chemical called genistein that is a powerful starver of blood vessels feeding cancer. How much do you need? That study also shows us that, at least for those women, that 10 grams of soy protein a day is what they actually calculated from the women who benefited. How much is 10 grams of soy protein? It's what you get in a cup of soy milk. So you don't need to actually have a lot, and you can switch off from soy milk to tofu to soy yogurt even. There's a lot of choices, edamame, tempeh, there's a miso, a lot of different choices. And so one of the foods that I like to talk about as an example of how to boost your health defense is soy food. And certainly in Asia, when they're in Asian countries where soy is popular, women who actually are diagnosed with breast cancer are not told to actually cut out soy. So that's just one example for that one defense system.
Give us 4 more. We need 4 more foods.
Yeah, okay. All right. So stem cells, growing our stem cells and helping our bodies regenerate from the inside out. Favorite food I like to talk about is dark chocolate. As if we needed another reason to actually like chocolate, right? So first of all, chocolate itself is a confection with sugar and milk and all that other kind of stuff. But what we really want to look for, and this is the reason it's dark chocolate, is it's made with cacao. Now, cacao is a natural bean that actually contains polyphenols. The darker it is, the more concentrated the polyphenols. And it turns out those polyphenols can actually coax out our stem cells after we eat the chocolate. So in my book, I talk about a study that was conducted in San Francisco that looked at people who already had cardiovascular disease. So these are people who, they're not doing that well. They've got some clogs in their blood vessels and everything. And it turned out that they showed that they gave those men hot cocoa, made with dark chocolate. So it's hot chocolate. They gave it twice a day. It's 8 fluid ounces, not very much, twice a day for 30 days. When they compared what was in their blood from the start of the experiment, from ground zero, day zero, with hot chocolate, to 30 days, it doubled the number of stem cells, their own regenerative stem cells in their bloodstream. And then when they blood flow, it doubled the improvement in their blood flow as well. So
Wow.
quite remarkable clinical study made with ultra dark chocolate. And that's an example of how foods like chocolate can activate our stem cell defenses. I can talk
Fantastic.
about a third one,
Yes.
microbiome.
Yes.
So, so microbiome, right now there is a anti-carb movement out there, right? So people are really saying you got to cut out your carbs, or you got to conclude your carbs, or cut out your gluten, or, you know, so it's one of those whiplash seesaw movements that are out there that confuse
Yes.
everybody, including me.
Yes. Yes.
I really tell people you have to go with science. Go with where the science is. That's like the flashlight in front of you, or, you know, if you put your, you know, your light, you know, the flashlight on your phone and you're looking at ahead walking outside. That's how we steer with solidity to know what we're doing. Okay, so it turns out that some breads actually are healthy, and I'll just tell two of them. One is actually sourdough bread, and the other one is pumpernickel bread, right? So many people haven't really thought about either bread for a long time, but pumpernickel is made with rye flour, and rye flour lowers levels of an unhealthy bacteria in the gut that actually produces a toxin that causes inflammation in the gut. So eating pumpernickel bread can lower that bacteria and lower inflammation. Sourdough bread is actually made with a healthy gut bacteria, a bacteria that's normally found in the gut called Lactobacillus reuteri. This is a natural, healthy gut bacteria that we know from research boosts our immune system, helps us heal faster and better, and in fact can even signal to the brain to release the social hormone oxytocin, which is what our brains release when we get that hug from somebody we love, that feel-good feeling. That bacteria can help to release that as well. Sourdough bread is made with that very same bacteria, and even though you bake the sourdough bread and the bacteria won't survive the heat, it turns out the remnants of the bacteria are enough to actually activate all those health defense systems as well.
You talk about nuts. So tell our listeners and viewers about the exciting news about nuts and how important they are. And are they in your top 5 foods?
Yeah, well, nuts are actually really important for a couple of reasons. They're probably the best snack that on the planet if you don't have a nut allergy. Uh, Nuts actually contain abundant fiber. That fiber is actually a prebiotic that actually feeds our gut bacteria. So the foods that we normally eat, we're feeding ourselves and we're also feeding our bacteria. When we give bacteria the fiber from nuts, the bacteria actually, our healthy bacteria, actually convert that fiber into fragments, some of which are biologically active and help our immune system and lower inflammation. Nuts, many tree nuts are also great sources of healthy omega-3 fatty acids as well. And whether it's a walnut, a pecan, an almond, a cashew, a chestnut, these are all amazing nuts that, unless you have an allergy, look across different cultures. You'll find, whether you're talking about an Asian culture or a Latin American culture or European culture, nuts are used in many, many different cultures as part of cuisine, in part because I think the ancient wisdom was that there is some health benefits that come from this.
What's your favorite nut? And what's the right way to eat nuts? Because I know you've talked a lot about also, it's not about the food, but it's also how you eat the food. And you gave a great example of tea, how don't have tea with milk because it sort of takes away the benefits. Similarly with nuts, what's the best way to eat nuts? And do they have to be sprouted? Should they be raw? Can I put some chilies on them? What's the right way? And of course, what's your favorite nut?
Well, I don't think there's one single right way to do it. For me personally, I like to eat foods very simply with some flavor on it. Walnuts are among my favorites. I also love pecans as well, and cashews are also great. I think the key thing is that not to put a lot of artificial ingredients on it. If you go out and look for these snack packs, Oftentimes you find that they're incredibly flavorful, but if you look at the ingredients, you'll find that they're doctored up. And part of the reason they're so tasty is they have a lot of artificial flavorings added to them. So, I like to sort of eat elementally when I can. And I just love the taste of, like, plain nuts. The key is actually, if you have there was an amazing study that came out about 2 years ago from a group of, very prestigious medical centers from Harvard and Duke and, Cornell and other places like that, where they were studying patients with colon cancer, stage 3 colon cancer under treatment. And they actually found that those patients with stage 3 colon cancer who ate a couple of servings of nuts, a couple of fistfuls of nuts a week, actually had a 50% reduction in the risk of mortality during their treatment. And so, here's an example. They were getting regular treatment, surgery, chemotherapy, whatever it is. But in fact, the nuts were the only other intervention. That it was presented at ASCO, which is one of the major cancer research conferences. And it became a headliner, really, in the press releases that came out around that meeting, which goes to show that when there is science and there's evidence that actually shows a benefit to food, we can start to bring the medical community along with it. Because I'm one of those doctors that does believe in regular medicine. I've seen the power of regular medicine and what it can actually do for people. But food is the missing tool in the toolbox. And I think that time is long overdue to be able to introduce the role of food that is supported by real evidence that everybody can use.
What is more powerful, food or medicine? And how should someone think about how they prioritize both? As an example, if I already have cancer, what is more important for me to focus on, especially given the fact that a lot of doctors say food doesn't matter, go home, eat your pizza, have some good high-fat milkshakes. Where do you come out on the debate between food versus medicine?
Right. Well, first of all, I think that the education of most doctors has been bereft, missing information on nutrition for decades. And so as a result, the medical community often doesn't know what to say about nutrition. And so that's why, as you recounted, like the oncologist, the cancer doctor will often tell their patient, "Oh, eat anything as long as you stay nourished, have something high fat." That's really outdated thinking, and it's going to change. It's already changing. We know that, for example, what a patient consumes if they are a cancer patient can be incredibly important beyond simply nutrition. We know that what we eat can influence our microbiome. And in my book, as you mentioned, I talk about the breakthrough of immune therapies, which help many people remarkably for their immune system to wipe out the cancer. But if they're missing, research has found that if they're missing a single gut bacteria called Akkermansia muciniphila, and this is only a relatively recently discovered bacteria, that the immune therapy is unlikely to work, meaning that you could be on the fanciest treatment around, medical treatment around. If you don't have the right type of microbiome, bacteria, your defenses aren't going to be functioning. And you can't eat that bacteria as a probiotic right now. The only way to grow that healthy bacteria is to eat food. So it's cranberry juice, pomegranate juice can actually do that. And actually mangoes can also help to grow Akkermansia. And the way they do this, by the way, is that those foods help develop the mucus lining in our gut. And that Akkermansia bacteria loves to grow in that mucus lining. So food is very complicated. Our bodies are very complicated. Treating cancer is very complicated. And for years, it's only all about the medical treatment. But what I'm talking about is all the health care that goes on between doctors' office visits.
I have to ask you about activated charcoal. It's another thing that's been in the news constantly. And you talked about the gut lining, especially the mucosal wall. There's different people that have different thoughts around what activated charcoal might do. And of course, then we've got some pretty well-known experts talking about drinking it with their lemon water in the morning or having it twice a day. Where do you come out on activated charcoal? Have you seen any science behind it? Are there any studies being done?
All the studies that I know, and I've used activated charcoal for patients for years, is really in the setting of poison in the emergency room. We know that activated charcoal binds a lot of poisons really easily, and that's a way to actually save people's lives if they've eaten something, ingested something, or been exposed to something that is incredibly noxious. The idea, the modern idea, kind of the fad idea of using charcoal is an extension of that to say, well, there's probably toxins in the gut, and let's see if we can use charcoal to pull it all out. It may do some of that, but we don't have really enough evidence to know whether or not, frankly, there's any potential harm or danger of flushing out all those other things. I could only guess that activated charcoal might also change the environment of the gut in a way that might not favor a healthy ecosystem of our microbiome. I think, we are all growing our own petting zoo of microorganisms in our gut bacteria.
So true.
Imagine unleashing a landslide of charcoal, through your petting zoo. You might have like a pretty big cleanup act to try to put everything back in order. So the more we understand about our gut, the more we want to take care of it by feeding the gut bacteria the things that are healthy for it, and not just simply destroying things.
I think so too. Intuitively, it just sounds to me wrong to be taking something prophylactically that's used in an emergency room to suck out poisons. To make that into a daily part of your routine just seems wrong, like we're damaging the gut lining instead of actually helping it nourish and grow. So the book, Eat to Beat Disease. Why should our readers buy this book? What is it that makes this book so special? What is the message that you want everyone to know?
Well, first of all, that it's a brand new day when it comes to food and health, because finally what I write about is that food has real science behind it, and that science that's behind it is not always what somebody's on the soapbox talking about. I wrote this book as a man on a mission to bring facts to people about food, because I have also been tired of being confused by all the seesawing and whiplashing that's been going on about foods, and you don't really know what's actually going on. So I wanted to basically put the facts out there, number one. Number two, I wanted people to understand that when it comes to food and health, again, it's really not just about the food, which is why there's no magic food. It's about understanding how our body responds. And this book, for the first time, really explains how the body responds and what is the scientific evidence for the food out there. It's different from every other book that's out there that I know of on diet, because I don't actually present a diet. I present a way of thinking about food that is liberating, doesn't involve shame or guilt, doesn't involve cutting food out of your life, but in fact says, hey, look, there's all these foods. I list 200 of them that you can choose from, and I present all the evidence. And if you can find something you like on that list of 200 foods, and I haven't met anybody who hasn't been able to find something, if you start with what you already love, you are already ahead of the game when it comes to eating for health. And it's never too late to start to eat to beat disease. And that's really one of the things that I'm actually encouraging readers to actually really embrace, that we can actually love our health by loving our food. And it's not always counterpoised, where people like, if you want to be healthy, you have to have your diet. If you want to just cheat on your diet, you're going to lose your health. What I'm saying is that we can actually align these up and really, really enjoy our lives throughout our lives, because sustainability is not just about our planet, which is of course very important, but it's really about how we live our lives in a responsible way. And we're responsible for our health, and food is something that we can do 3 to 5 times a day. So why not?
I love it. And I loved the book. With that said, Dr. Lee, one parting advice for someone out there that's either suffering from heart disease or cancer or diabetes and is looking to beat disease, what is the first most important thing they should do starting today?
I would say buy my book, look at the list of 200 foods, circle all the ones you already like, and then go shopping. Buy the things that you love that are healthy for you, and you'll never regret it.
I love it. Thank you so much again for your time today, Dr. Lee. Keep up the amazing work that you're doing on helping us all get to a greater self. Stay smiling, and I'll see you on another one of these podcasts.